Hello everyone, this is Ukraine today. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has arrived in Pokrovsk. Ukrainian warriors are fiercely fighting back and launching counterattacks. The heaviest battles continue near Pokrovsk and Kupyansk. Putin is running out of cannon fodder. North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un has sent another 10,000 fighters to support Russia. Ukrainian drones hit energy facilities deep inside Russian territory once again. Ukrainians are not the only ones who will freeze this winter, Russians as well. Incredible and unique inventions from Ukrainian military engineers. We will show the new weapon that make Putin tremble in his bunker and why the whole world is lining up to get them. Donald Trump continues to surprise unpleasantly. The White House has weakened sanctions against the dictator of Belarus. All that and more coming up next. My name is Sima Shilenko. It's the 5th of November. Let's start. Also, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and please tell us in the comments which city and country you're watching from and whether you support Ukraine in our fight against the occupiers. It's really important to us. The hottest frontline sector remains Pokrovsk. The occupiers have thrown everything they have into this direction. Despite catastrophic losses, Russian commanders are trying to capture the city. Ukrainian defenders are holding their lines and striking back. Special forces of Ukraine's defense intelligence under the command of Kirill Budanov have taken favorable positions and are destroying Russian logistics and manpower. More about the battle for Pokrovsk in our report.
The decisive battle for Pokrovsk continues. Russian troops are advancing within the city, but Ukrainian forces are holding the defense and launching counterattacks, slowing down the enemy's actions. The defense forces continue clearing Pokrovsk of the occupiers, currently in the northern part of the city. This became possible thanks to the fact that over the past few days it was possible to provide reinforcements in personnel and equipment. After a successful airborne operation, additional special forces units joined the GUR commandos who had secured certain positions and established a ground corridor. According to the President of Ukraine, special operations of various kinds are taking place in Pokrovsk, but most of them should not be discussed. Russian troops are trying to break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses, attacking in several directions at once and concentrating the largest number of soldiers and officers here.
According to various estimates by the Ukrainian command, around 100,000 Russian servicemen are directly or indirectly involved in this entire operation around Pokrovsk. These are approximate figures. That is just to give you an idea of the scale of the forces involved. In fact, I would even say more. There have been instances of troops being redeployed from the Sumy region and from the direction of Kostiantynivka towards Pokrovsk to reinforce the area because there simply aren't enough people.
We're talking about so-called suicide squads, that is, contract soldiers with an average life expectancy of 12 days, as well as Russian army special units, plus in addition Marine brigades. In particular, the 155th Marine Brigade has been redeployed to the Pokrovsk direction from the Kursk region.
According to the Institute for the Study of War, the occupiers have advanced in the southern part of Minograd and in eastern Rodinskoye, gradually approaching the city of Pokrovsk itself.
At this time, there is no reason to say that Russian occupation forces have established a direct and stable presence in the immediate vicinity. Currently, the presence of Russian occupiers has been verified at the site of Mine Administration 5/6. Regarding Rodinskoye, it should be noted that the situation is changing dynamically. In other words, the occupiers are trying to intensify their offensive in order to take locations held by Ukraine's defense forces under direct control. Ukraine's defense forces are conducting counterattacks to prevent further advances by the Russian occupiers.
The enemy is trying to encircle Pokrovsk and the nearby settlements. The occupiers are increasing the number of air attacks, particularly using glide bombs and drones.
There is no classic encirclement as it is usually understood or described in textbooks around the city of Pokrovsk. In other words, there is no continuous ring, it is not closed. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the section that remains open is about 5 kilometers wide. But this is an extremely critical distance and it no longer matters because Russian drones are already present there. Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups are already there, shells are flying in, and for the movement of Ukrainian troops, The situation has deteriorated to the maximum in recent weeks.
According to the General Staff, over the past day, Ukrainian defenders have stopped 55 assault actions by the aggressor.
During these combined attacks, up to a tank battalion of the armed forces of the Russian Federation is used. That's more than 30 units of heavy armored vehicles. Moreover, the tactic of no expense spared is being used. The occupiers are well aware of the superiority of Ukraine's defense forces in the use of FPV drones, and that no more than 20% of their heavy armored vehicles and accordingly personnel will reach the positions of Ukraine's defense forces.
Despite the enemy's active operations, the armed forces of Ukraine continue to hold their positions and destroy enemy forces.
Over the past week, Ukraine's defense forces have successfully counterattacked and managed to deoccupy 4 settlements: Kucherev Yar, Sukhetskoye, Zatishyev, and Shakovo. At the moment, the occupiers are trying to intensify their offensive along the flanks of the Ukrainian group, specifically in the area of Vladimirovka, with the threat of advancing towards Grishino. These are combined attacks involving the use of armored vehicles. And in the area of Rodinskoye.
On the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk operation in the Dobropoli area, Ukrainian forces have liberated part of the territories that Russian troops had previously advanced into. According to analysts, the Donetsk region remains the main direction of Russia's offensive this winter, with the goal of achieving significant results by the spring of 2025.
President Zelenskyy visited the frontline areas in Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. He met with commanders and soldiers defending Pokrovsk, Mirnograd and Dobropilya. One of the key issues discussed was the increased supply of drones, and the president confirmed that significantly more FPVs will be deployed to the front lines.
There are many ideas for new weapons developments, and now the first and foremost priority is drones. Most of the money goes to drones and their components, and that's right, that's how it should be. So we are looking for all ways to increase our ability to achieve results. The key task is to increase crews and supplies.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian engineers have created a domestic analog of the Chinese Mavic drones, the kind most demanded at the front. And that's just one innovation. Our military tech sector is rapidly adapting to the needs of the battlefield. We will show the newest Ukrainian weapons, the kind that even NATO countries are already lining up to purchase.
Reconnaissance, fire adjustment, and striking targets by dropping munitions. The Chinese Mavic drone is practically the main weapon of the Ukrainian armed forces in the war against the occupier. And now, Ukrainian industry has begun supplying domestically produced Mavic-type UAVs to the front lines.
A certain Mr. X invested, created a Ukrainian Mavic, and we will see it soon. We've already delivered the first 1,000 to the battlefield.
Compared to the Chinese Mavic, the Ukrainian counterpart has a greater flight range and can carry a heavier payload. It is used not only for reconnaissance, but also for strike missions. The importance of Ukrainian drones appearing in this niche can hardly be overstated, since there are huge problems with Mavic supplies to Ukraine.
DJI has banned sales to Ukraine, piously claiming that its products are not intended for military purposes, so drones have to be purchased from third parties. The security issues are obvious. The Pentagon has banned any use of DJI drones which send data back to the manufacturers. DJI has also added security features that make it impossible for the latest models to fly in geo-blocked zones, including Ukraine, without extensive hacking. Finally, sovereign drone production appears to be a key strategic capability for the future.
The Chinese Mavic drone's counterpart is called the Shmavic, but despite its ironic name, it has already been certified and boasts some serious features.
The Shmavic is positioned as a tactical reconnaissance drone designed to carry out operational tasks on the front lines, unlike the civilian Mavic, which is mainly used for aerial photography and videography. The Shmavic is built for combat conditions. It has a range of up to 15 kilometers, a flight time of up to 60 minutes, and is equipped with a reliable navigation system that is resistant to interference.
As early as last year, the government announced its interest in replacing Chinese drones. Now, manufacturers have already officially certified Ukrainian Mavics and have set up local production, ensuring continued availability.
As of today, it is impossible to completely replace the entire fleet of foreign drones currently present in Ukraine in a short period of time. Our weapons manufacturers already have developments and designs that meet the needs of our security and defense forces. Now it is necessary to scale up this production, minimize the number of foreign equivalents as much as possible, and switch to domestic models.
There are already many Ukrainian analogs of the Mavic, including Ukreporter, Yaitia, and the charming Shmavik. They are larger than DJI Mavic drones, equipped with long-range communication, resistance to interference, and are more expensive. However, they may turn out to be more economical due to their greater reliability.
For us, the key indicator is not the price per drone, but the cost of a single mission. While a typical Mavic performs about 60 missions per drone, our systems average around 300 missions per unit. With a comparable purchase price, the cost per mission is 5 times lower, which means that military units operating our drones receive a much greater overall economic benefit. Drone manufacturer?
Independent UAV production is a crucial element in modern warfare, and Ukraine knows this better than anyone, as both short-range UAVs and long-range strike drones have become vital components of national defense.
The occupiers are critically lacking in people, or more correctly, cannon fodder for assaults. To fill their ranks, they are pulling fighters from every corner they have. North Korea has reportedly sent at least 10,000 troops to join Russian forces. Pyongyang claimed they are construction workers, but South Korean intelligence states say that these units are already deployed near the front. Instead of shovels, they will carry rifles. Nearly 1,000 North Korean soldiers in Ukraine have already been killed. In Sudan, rebels have once again shot down a Russian Il-76 military transport aircraft near the city of Baba Nusa. Everyone on board was killed.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Russian infrastructure continues to take heavy hits. Ukrainian drones struck a thermal power plant in the city of Orel. Local officials claim they shot down all FPVs, but residents report much more serious damage and say missiles may have been used. Ukrainian drone operators are increasingly striking deep inside Russian territory. In the past 24 hours, a chemical plant in Bashkortostan and an oil refinery in Novgorod region were destroyed. We explain how these operations work and why they are strategically crucial before winter.
Military facilities, energy infrastructure and the oil industry. The war has definitively moved onto Russian territory, and it seems the Ukrainian armed forces have chosen their targets in the occupiers' rear and are increasing their long-range strikes.
One of the main goals is to force Russia to end the war. The idea is to make the cost of this war higher for Russia so that there is more motivation to bring it to an end.
At the same time, the defense forces are giving the Russians more motivation every day. In the past few weeks, not a single night has passed in Russia without something exploding, catching fire, or being destroyed. We've gathered the most high-profile incidents. Undoubtedly, the most striking event in terms of Russian blackouts was the Ukrainian armed forces attack on the Moscow region on the night of November 1st. Monitoring channels reported hundreds of drones that flew out to bomb Russia, and they hit their targets. Even though Moscow's energy system held up, entire settlements around the capital were left without power. In particular, the Moscow region and the city of Zhukovsky were left in the dark.
The armed forces of Ukraine have already carried out numerous strikes on stations and substations, and electricity and heating are periodically cut off in many cities of Russia and in the occupied territories. Let me remind you, Ukraine is conducting a campaign against Russian energy infrastructure in response to Russia's terror attacks on Ukraine's power-generating facilities. I believe that in December, this retaliatory campaign will reach a new level, with Flamingo missiles being used almost on a daily basis.
The campaign to destroy Russia's oil industry is also ongoing. In particular, the recent strikes on the Russian oil terminal in Tuapse were especially effective.
The attack on the Tuapse seaport was quite large-scale, effective, and also spectacular. Local residents began taking photos and recording videos of the attack. The beginning of this attack was also captured on video. Meanwhile, local emergency services issued their usual statements, asking people not to film the aftermath of the strikes. this helps the enemy.
However, what actually helps the Ukrainian armed forces is not the videos made by concerned Russians who, in the fourth year of the war, have suddenly discovered that it is happening right outside their windows, but rather intelligence data, including from Western sources, which make such precise strikes possible.
As a result of the strike, according to the Russian side's own assessment, Ukrainian UAVs hit the following targets. The central overpass, which is the main hub. At the oil pumping station, a significant and strategic location. And accordingly, we are specifically talking about a direct strike on an oil tanker, which, at the precise moment of the attack, was in the process of being loaded with oil.
At the same time, when possible, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to kill several birds with one stone with a single strike. That is, they destroy a facility that is extremely important for the Russian economy on one hand, and on the other, they hit openly military targets.
The strike was carried out on an industrial giant of the Stavropol region, the Stavrolen petrochemical plant in the city of Budyonovsk. This is one of the largest producers of polyethylene, polypropylene, benzene and other petrochemical components that are actively used in the military-industrial complex.
Analysts note that this was the first time a strike was carried out there. By the way, the plant is located 700 kilometers from Ukraine, and the enterprise supplies raw materials both to the domestic market and for export. This means that the attack damages not only the military-industrial complex, but also Russia's export revenues. Defense forces are also targeting Russian facilities in the occupied territories. A few days ago, residents of Crimea felt this especially strongly after one of the largest attacks on the peninsula in recent months, particularly targeting oil depots in Vardiske and Sevastopol.
Here is the outcome of this episode. In just 1 hour, 2 major oil facilities in Crimea were put out of operation. This means a complete loss of stability in the occupiers' rear supply lines in this sector, especially against the backdrop of the destruction and disabling of the largest oil terminal in Feodosia and the general gasoline shortage in Russia itself, which, I remind you, is the only source for replenishing Crimea's oil depots.
Most recently, on the night of November 4th, drones and Storm Shadow missiles launched by the defense forces managed to damage both Russian energy infrastructure and oil depots, and also significantly complicated their presence in the occupied territories by effectively disabling all military facilities within the strike zone.
Ukrainian drones struck substations in Luhansk, Alchevsk, Kadivka and Pervomaisk. These are temporarily occupied territories of Luhansk region. There have been reports of widespread power outages for consumers, blockades on the territory of the Russian Federation in the past 24 hours, drone strikes by the Ukrainian defense forces. Kursk region, this is Zheleznogorsk. The city is completely without power due to the substation. Lipetsk region, this is the PS Sustraction substation. Usman, and accordingly, the city of Orel. A strike was carried out on the Orel CHP plant. That's regarding the blackout.
As for military targets, analysts call one of the most successful long-range attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces the explosions at the dam near Belgorod. The strike was so precise that no civilians were harmed. However, Russian units in the Kharkiv region were cut off from their forces due to the flooding, and the offensive failed.
An important objective is to strike at Russia's logistical capabilities, at ammunition depots, airfields, aircraft and troop concentrations in order to create difficulties for Moscow's war machine. The goal is to hit the centers from which Russia directs operations at the front and from where it can attack Ukraine's strategic infrastructure, including its energy sector.
At the same time, it's far too early for Russians to relax, as announced by the head of the drone systems forces, Madya. This winter, Russian citizens will find out what a blackout is, and at the same time, he reminded that gas and oil burn very well, clearly hinting at new attacks on oil refineries.
As of November, according to estimates from the Russian side itself, about 40% of oil refineries on the territory of the Russian Federation have already been put out of commission.
Well then, as they say, to be continued.
Even in war, there are reasons to smile. In the 43rd Mechanized Brigade near Kupyansk, a driver named Hrynya fights side by side with his tiny partner, a Maltipoo dog named Perseus. Perseus is not just a mascot, he's a strategist, a psychologist, and the top controller of meal schedules. The White House has weakened sanctions on Belarus. The US Ministry of Finance lifted restrictions on the state airline Belarusian, an aircraft used by Lukashenko and his circle following the release of some political prisoners. The Belarusian opposition warned this is a tactical trick to deceive the West. Well, if Trump lets Putin fool him, why wouldn't his vassal try the same? Russia is actively fueling anti-Ukrainian sentiment in Poland to weaken support for Kyiv. Propaganda networks are operating in key cities like Gdynia and Gdansk, major hubs for weapons and humanitarian aid heading to Ukraine.
The number of attacks and crimes committed by Poles against Ukrainian citizens has sharply increased over the past year. Ukrainians are attacked on the streets with shouts of "Go back home" and "Go to the front." Even children are insulted.
In fact, it's outright humiliation, let's be honest. And this is happening at school. They would fall to the floor shouting, "Missile, get down," and of course they laughed because that's a very funny joke, so to speak.
This wave of aggression stands in stark contrast to the atmosphere of solidarity that prevailed just 3 years ago, when Poland opened its borders to millions of Ukrainian refugees.
For example, now it's become very difficult to find housing because we have a lot of refugees from Ukraine, and it's really become hard to look for an apartment. There aren't enough jobs.
The rate of robberies in Poland, where Ukrainians are the victims, has increased by 57%. There has also been a rise in cases of harassment, identity theft, coercion, and blackmail.
It has happened more than once that when someone heard us speaking our language, they immediately reacted aggressively. And this happens on the tram, in stores, and in other public places. Once, a man just insulted me at a bus stop. For no reason at all. I was told that I was a freeloader and should go home.
In 2024 alone, Ukrainians contributed more than 18 billion zlotys to Poland's budget. Almost 1 million people are using temporary protection. Experts also talk about disinformation involving the Kremlin.
The publication notes that Ukrainians are being beaten and humiliated more often.
A Bandera test has appeared at the Ukrainian-Polish border.
Polish chauvinists hate Ukrainians and the Ukrainian language.
Mikola, it's time to work. In Poland, unemployed Ukrainians have been stripped of social benefits.
And negativity among Poles is also spreading due to the economic crisis and political manipulation.
People are afraid that Ukrainians are taking their place in line. At the doctor's office, in kindergartens, or in the job market.
On social networks, fake stories with Russian disinformation are spreading, for example, about so-called entitled Ukrainians who refuse to pay for services.
We live in a time when social networks function as digital gossip.
According to Polish law enforcement, from the beginning of the year until July 25th, 543 hate-motivated incidents were recorded. The most common crimes against Ukrainians are threats of violence. If in 2022 there were 317 such cases, then in 2024 there were already 479. It is worth noting that hate crimes are a form of discrimination and a violation of human rights. Why are Poles looking for betrayal among Ukrainians when the enemy has already infiltrated from within? Kremlin bot farms operate online, while spies are active directly inside the country. In a Polish city, a married couple was detained who had been in contact with representatives of the Russian FSB, following a scheme to receive a package containing powerful explosives via a courier service. A suspected courier for Russian intelligence was detained in Poland. Russia was preparing terrorist attacks in Europe using drones and cans filled with powerful explosives attached to the UAVs. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that 8 people suspected of preparing sabotage have already been detained.
The case is currently under investigation. Additional operational measures are being carried out.
The country does not openly accuse Russia and does not disclose exactly what the planned acts of sabotage entailed or who was behind them. At the same time, the country is preparing for a possible war with the Russian Federation and the countries of the North Atlantic Alliance, which could begin as early as 2027.
Our intelligence services point to such a possible scenario. NATO commanders are talking about this, and so are we. We are doing this to send a clear signal to Russia and China. We know about their plans and want to stop them.
European countries have repeatedly encountered unidentified UAVs on their territory. Such drones monitor airports and bases. For example, during international exercises in Poland, Dutch military personnel saw UAVs when they set up camp at an airfield.
They keep coming up with new scare stories all the time. Look, drones showed up in Poland. Where did they come from? They flew into Ukraine.
The detection of Russian drones on Polish territory led to a doubling of the number of Poles willing to voluntarily mobilize at the outbreak of war. But that number is still not enough. Only 39% of Poles support the reinstatement of mandatory military conscription. Supporters are mainly fans of the Polish government and people over 70, especially those living in rural areas. At the same time, opponents are mostly women, young people under 30, and residents of large cities with higher education. Despite the threat from the north, Poles fall for Russian provocations and do not fully trust their own government. This is exactly what could backfire on them and help weaken Poland, which is precisely what the Kremlin is aiming for.
And finally, two of Putin's most disgusting propagandists just got married. Singer, shaman and hate-monger Ekaterina Mizulina held a ceremony in occupied Donetsk, dressed in military-style outfits. I'm only interested in one thing: is the relationship between these two as real as the marriage paper issued to them in the pseudo-republic not recognized by anyone? So that's it for now. Thank you for being with us, and please don't forget to subscribe, like, and let us know which country you're watching from and whether you stand with Ukraine. See you soon, and glory to Ukraine.